This is a new channel that is going to be talking about television, current television, old television programs, and the Emmy Awards, and the history of the Emmys, and how certain shows found Emmy success. I'm going to try to be going back and doing some profiles of old shows that won the Emmy for Best Comedy or Best Drama or Best Limited Series, as well as some of my favorites. And I'll be covering seasons of current shows that are ongoing that I guess have Emmy buzz in them. And I'm doing it because I thought it'd be an interesting way to learn about some of the shows that these voters every year like, and also to see how the trends in television kind of change from year to year. My first episode is going to be focusing on the most recent Emmy nominations, the 78th Emmy Awards. And the nominations that were announced earlier this month for the ceremony that's airing on NBC and Peacock on September 14th. I'm going to focus on the major nominees from the three major categories of comedy, drama, and limited series. I won't get into some of the other categories, as those are mostly covered in the Creative Arts Emmys, which are a separate ceremony that happens from the Primetime Emmy Awards, which is the one we usually see on television. Usually the Creative Arts Emmys focus on a lot of the categories in reality, short form, and variety, though a few of these categories are announced at the Primetime Emmy ceremony. Also, in the last, let's say, maybe 10-15 years, the categories for guest actor and actress in a comedy and drama series were also announced at the Creative Arts Emmys instead of the Primetime Emmys. This year there's been further changes that really affect this category of limited or anthology series. And I'm going to get into each of the categories and talk about the major leaders and nominations, some of the surprises, some of the surprising stubs maybe, and what this crop of nominees tells us about the state of television watching today. So, first, let's talk about limited or anthology series. And for those who are maybe new to the category, what this means is that a limited series is a mini-series that only airs for one set of episodes, while an anthology has multiple seasons, but each season is a different narrative, different stories, sometimes different actors or different directors, but ultimately is not a continuous dramatic or comedic story, because that would make it a comedy or drama. There's been some finagling among nominees sometimes when they determine if they're going to be a mini-series or anthology. Oftentimes a show is intended to be a single limited series and then may have success, and that may lead it to become an anthology series, like one of the shows in this category here, or in some cases, like Shogun a few years ago, become a dramatic series instead. We'll get into a little bit of that and what that means for those shows. So, the nominees for Outstanding Limited or Anthology Series were All Her Fault, which aired on Peacock, The Beast and Me, which was a Netflix show, Beef, which is a Netflix show, DTF St. Louis, which was on HBO, and Love Story, John F. Kennedy and Carolyn Bessette, which was a show on FX. Of these five, Beef is currently the only anthology series. It was in its second season this year. The first season aired on April 6, 2023, and is a show created by Lee Sung-jin that is a black comedy show taking place, at least for the first two seasons, in California, and focusing usually, at least in the first two seasons, on a conflict between two different characters or two sets of characters. Usually, given Lee Sung-jin's Korean background, it involves Korean characters or Korean American characters, as well as questions of class and the tensions that creates. The first season starred Steven Yeun and Ali Wong and was a relative surprise hit. Came out of somewhat nowhere. It was a Netflix show, but I think did not have the biggest roster of stars, did not come from a very well-known creator, and was kind of this plucky, edgy miniseries that had great soundtrack and some really interesting filmmaking. The Beef this year, pardon my pun, is truly beefed up. Not only based on the stars of the show, the actors in this season, many of whom were nominated, were Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan as one couple, and then Charles Melton from Riverdale and May December, and Kaylee Spaney from Priscilla as another couple. It takes place at a prestigious golf club where Oscar Isaac is the manager and his wife is a would-be Airbnb curator manager, while Melton and Spaney play their employees at the club who are looking for a way to make enough money to really just survive and as young people in California. The show also includes some great performances from Yoon Yoo-jung, who is an Oscar winner for her role in Minari, as well as Song Kang-ho, the legendary Korean actor who many people were introduced to in Parasite. Beef has a lot of parables, or a lot of similarities with Parasite, not just because it stars a lot of Korean actors, but because it deals with the dark humor of class warfare and the skewing of the rich and the would-be rich. The second season of Beef was a pretty big success. It was nominated for 3 major nominations. So, Best Limited Series, Best Actor, Oscar Isaac, and Best Actress Carey Mulligan. It should be more, and when I say 3, it doesn't sound like a lot. The change for this year, which I'll get into a little bit more detail about my bigger thoughts about it, is that supporting actress and actor in a limited series, as well as outstanding writing and directing for a limited series, are no longer categories that will be presented at the primetime Emmy Awards ceremony. So despite the fact that a number of actors got nominated for their role in Beef as limited series actors, as well as directing and writing nominations for the show as well, those don't count anymore as major nominations, which I'll get into my thoughts on that. But you might be able to tell from my voice that I'm not especially pleased about that development. I'm focusing more on Beef because I do think that it's a pretty big front runner for the awards from a technical perspective. All Her Fault and The Beast and Me, as you can see by the similar font, are kind of similar shows. These are true crime shows starring well-regarded former Emmy-winning actresses. All Her Fault stars Succession's Sarah Snook as a mother whose son is kidnapped, and The Beast in Me stars Homeland's Claire Danes as a mother grieving who starts to write a book about a rumored killer next door, played by Matthew Rhys. Both of these shows are pulpy. They focus a little bit on the not true crime of it all. They're pretty entertaining, but I think ultimately they are kind of relics of the past in terms of the type of genre of show people watch, and I don't think will be major contenders for awards. Then there's Love Story, John Kennedy and Carolyn Bessette, which is an entry in the story anthology collection produced by Ryan Murphy. It's the first in the Love Story entries, which is a new addition after Horror Story and Crime Story and Sports Story even. And if you've watched those shows, you'll know that even though Murphy is not actually writing or directing the shows, he's mostly executive producing them, and this show was created and written mostly by Connor Hines. A Murphy show has a very specific formula. It focuses on usually a tabloid, tawdry, real-life pop culture story from the 80s or 90s. So think of, the OJ trial, the Menendez brothers, the Versace murders, and casts actors, some of them very well known, some of them not so well known, to play famous people and impart a sense of fantastical fiction to real stories. It's a very hit or miss proposition with these shows. Some of them come off as the right kind of sleazy, tawdry, pulpy, like the OJ series, which is one of my favorite limited series, and we can get into that when I talk about it. I'm sure I'll talk about that show and the Versace season of that of American Crime Story as well. Or they can be exploitative and pretty icky. I would say the Menendez brothers crime monster series, which has also focused on Jeffrey Dahmer and Ed Gein, I find particularly in bad taste, and ultimately just not that interesting. And I would say that Love Story falls somewhere in the middle. It properly, I think, captures the specific vibe of the 90s, although I would say as someone born in 93, I wasn't exactly up and at it in the culture of the time, but it captures a specific tone and vibe of the time, while also feeling pretty exploitative of his characters. And I won't ruin it, but for certain reasons, these characters and their interactions are not really publicly known to people. There's not a lot of people who actually know what went on with these two characters, John F. Kennedy Jr., the son of John F. Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy, and Carolyn Bessette, his wife, who he met in New York, who used to work for Calvin Klein. There's been some protestations from the Kennedy family in particular, and I do think that a lot of the show focuses too much on the glitzy name drops of the Kennedy story, but I also think that it succeeds when it focuses on Carolyn Bessette, and who I think is played really well by Sarah Pigeon. She's excellent in the show, and her mother, played by Constance Zimmer, who got a surprise nomination for Best Supporting Actress in a Limited Series. And sadly, if she does win, I'd be over the moon, but we will not see it on the main ceremony because of the change in how they're presenting categories. I don't think that the show will win Best Limited Series, but I think it's an interesting show because of the contrasts. And again, Sarah Pigeon and Constance Zimmer were nominated. Naomi Watts plays Jackie Kennedy in a pretty awful impression of Jackie Kennedy, and she was not nominated, which I was comforted about. And the actor who plays John F. Kennedy Jr., Paul Anthony Kelly, I'm sure he's doing his best, but I think the only reason he was cast is because he looks like John F. Kennedy Jr. and did not really wow me with his acting chops, so he was not nominated for an Emmy. The final show that I'll talk about here, which I think probably actually has the inside track on a number of wins at the ceremonies, is DTF St. Louis. DTF St. Louis is an HBO limited series created by a creator named Stephen Conrad, who has done a number of interesting, lesser seen television programs on a number of streaming services, including a show called Patriot, which aired on Amazon Prime, which I have not watched. Another show called Perpetual Grace Limited, which was on Epix. I don't know where Epix is or how to watch Epix. I'm in Canada, but I don't think people in the United States know what Epix is. That still attracted a lot of big stars, such as Ben Kingsley and Terry O'Quinn from Lost and Deborah Winger. And I think was heralded by, I guess, I don't know if you can call it indie television watchers, because Patriot was on Amazon Prime, and Amazon is the least indie company on earth. But from people who watch less heralded, less viewed shows. So DTF St. Louis came out, and I gotta say, I watched the first episode when it aired in the spring and was a little bit turned off by the particularly black level of comedy the show had. It takes place, as you can guess, in St. Louis and stars David Harbour and Jason Bateman as two guys who work in television. Jason Bateman is a weatherman. David Harbour is his American Sign Language interpreter. And they meet and kind of bond over their dissatisfaction with their lives, particularly with their sex lives. David Harbour is particularly kind of a sad sack. He's married to Linda Cardellini, who is not really attracted to him anymore. And the premise, I guess, initially of the first episode of the show is that the two discover an app where married people can have affairs. And then the episode ends in a pretty shocking way, which I won't ruin. And then the rest of this miniseries tries to understand what led to that point. And I will say, I think the first episode does the series a disservice because as you get more and more into the series, it is not the mystery box caper whodunit show that the first episode suggested it. And I'll leave it at that. I won't get into any further details about it. But it's actually a pretty interesting, pretty weird look at male companionship, male sexuality, intimacy, relationships in general, sexual expression. And I can't say that it was one of my favorite shows of the year, but I came away from it oddly intrigued. And I kept watching because I was interested in where they would go next. I think David Harbour's quite good in the show. I think he is on the inside track to win Best Supporting Actor. Again, we're not going to see it on television on Emmy night, which is a shame. Linda Cardellini is probably also the favorite for Best Supporting Actress, which again is very frustrating that you won't be able to see her award because she is a great actress with a long history in very good television shows. And I think DTF's a very interesting case study in weird television. And I think HBO took a big swing on it, and clearly the critics and voters liked it because it was nominated for a number of awards across many categories. Going into some of the other nominations within limited series, I'll go through them quickly, but Oscar Isaac is nominated for Beef. Matthew Rhys, nominated twice this year, but for The Beast in Me, which is one of those crime shows talked about. Charlie Hunnam's in one of the Ryan Murphy monster shows, which is I did not watch. I'll probably watch a few episodes because any show nominated for a major award, I will watch at least one episode, and usually if I can find the episode that that actor or writer or director was nominated for, because even actors can submit episodes to be nominated for, I will watch at least that episode. Jason Bateman not nominated here for DTF, but he is nominated for Black Rabbit. I believe he's also nominated for DTF as well. And Riz Ahmed got a nomination for a show Bait, which I have not seen yet, but I've heard interesting things about, and it's kind of about being a South Asian man who is trying to play James Bond. Lead actress, we have Claire Danes for The Beast in Me, Carey Mulligan for Beef, Sarah Snook for All Her Fault, Sarah Pigeon for Love Story, and Sally Field for a television movie called Remarkably Bright Creatures. I won't really get into TV movies. If one wins, I will watch it. There have been some interesting ones that have been nominated. TV movie has really changed in recent years since the advent of streaming, because TV movies used to be kind of issue, movie of the week, true story dramas starring relative big stars, and now any single movie that goes straight to streaming that doesn't have a theater run is considered a television movie. So last year, the very excellent movie Rebel Ridge was nominated for and won Best TV Movie, and ultimately that was a movie that was better than most movies in theaters and should have been nominated. I'll also note that a very white collection of nominees, and it's a little better to get into certain other categories, but it's definitely a common theme. Outstanding Supporting Actor, again, we have a list of white guys: Richard Jenkins, David Harbour, Jason Bateman, all nominated for DTF. Jason Bateman, like I said, in two different categories. Charles Melton for Beef. Richard Gadd for the show Half Man. Richard Gadd, if you'll remember, was the creator and star of Baby Reindeer and was the big winner on Emmy night 2 years ago. His show Half Man, starring him and Jamie Bell, had initially some buzz about it being a big Emmy winner show, but when it aired, it was just so depressing and punishing that I just don't think enough people finished it, honestly, to nominate it for major awards. It was well written and well made, but just absolutely dour, really depressing television. And then we have Nick Offerman, who is also a double nominee, and I'll get to him in his category soon, for a show Death by Lightning, which I really liked, which was a 4-episode miniseries about the assassination of President James Garfield by Charles Guiteau. Michael Shannon plays James Garfield. Matthew McFadden played Charles Guiteau really well. It was a shame he was not nominated. And Nick Offerman plays Chester A. Arthur, who was Garfield's vice president. It was a very fun show. I think it deserved a little better. It took history and gave it a little bit of a almost Ian Nuccian Death of Stalin type vibe. It's the type of show that I think is more interesting than, in my mind, some of the non-true crime, murder, tortured women shows that were nominated this year. And then supporting actress, like I said, a big year for TTF St. Louis. Constance Zimmer, the only nominee for Love Story. There could have also been a nomination for Love Story for the actress who played Carolyn Kennedy, John F. Kennedy Jr.'s sister, who is Mamie Gummer, who was actually the daughter of Meryl Streep. Although I think it might be the wrong Gummer, actually, but one of the Gummer sisters. But I think, again, a very interesting category. Laurie Metcalf, Emmy, regular as well. And then for directing and writing, I won't get into it, but a lot of not love for Beef and a lot of love for DTF St. Louis as well. I'll then go to drama. By the way, it was Grace Gummer, not Mamie Gummer, who plays the Kennedy sister in Love Story. My apologies to the Streep Gummer family. Moving on to drama series, the nominees were The Diplomat, which aired on Netflix, The Gilded Age, which was on HBO, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms on HBO, Paradise on Hulu, The Pit on HBO Max, Pluribus on Apple TV, Slow Horses on Apple TV, and Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV. For some reason, Your Friends and Neighbors did not have a logo on this website. This is an interesting group of categories, group of nominees, I should say. The big takeaway for me is that Apple TV, which is a relatively lesser viewed app, had a lot of success this year with its nominees across both comedy and drama. Starting in drama, Slow Horses is a show that puts out consistent 6-episode seasons every year, every fall, and I think it's become one of these shows that just gets nominations almost automatically, along with its star Gary Oldman and its other stars like Jack Lowden. Your Friends and Neighbors, this is the only nomination for the show across the major categories. If you have not heard of it, I promise you your 55-year-old parents or 65-year-old parents have seen it. It is a big winner on the category of people need something to watch and they just find it on Apple TV because John Hamm's in it. I watched the first season. I found it relatively sterile for as much as it tries to have some sort of edge. I find, almost fits some sort of TV formula for grabbing eyeballs, but does not really take, in my mind, any interesting risks. Maybe I'm being too harsh on it. Maybe you can tell me your thoughts about the show below. But its nomination here is a function, I think, of just a huge popularity among middle-aged people, I think. Looking then at another show, Paradise. This is kind of in the same vein as Your Friends and Neighbors, but I will credit Paradise in the sense that it takes some very wild swings. It's a very gonzo show in a lot of ways. It's from the same guy who did This Is Us and stars Sterling K. Brown, so you might think it's at one point one type of show, but it really does take some very interesting risks and has a very good cast. It's kind of a guilty watch for me, and maybe I'll talk about the show when it has its next season, but it's definitely a function of its popularity less than maybe its critical panache that it appears in these nominations. Before I get into the HBO shows, I'll talk about The Diplomat, and I guess I didn't talk about Pluribus either. Diplomat is a show on Netflix. Again, I think it's one of these shows that people just turn on and watch. It has slowly morphed into almost a more soap opera version of The West Wing. Kerry Russell is very good in it. Allison Janney's in it. Bradley Whitford, again, a lot of West Wing influence there. Rufus Sewell's very good in it. Kerry Russell having a big year with her partner Matthew Rhys this year on the Emmys. I don't know that it's a favorite or a contender to win Best Drama, but it is interesting. And then we get to what I think are some of the interesting shows on HBO. The Gilded Age. It's interesting to me that it keeps getting nominated for Best Drama. I think there are a lot of people who watch it who must be either one of ironic watchers who like Carrie Coon or Cynthia Nixon, and then a lot of people who love Broadway theater because the show is littered with major actors on Broadway who most TV and maybe movie viewers would not know necessarily if they were on their screen or be excited by. It's written by and created by Julian Fellows, who is best known for Downton Abbey. If you like Downton Abbey, but you want an American show full of Broadway actors, you'll like The Gilded Age. Then Night of the Seven Kingdoms got a nomination. Night of the Seven Kingdoms was the lighter alternative to House of the Dragon in terms of Game of Thrones properties on HBO. House of the Dragon this year with its third season has gotten some better reviews, but is kind of has this reputation as a kind of a plotting, punishing, very violent, but also not so exciting show on television with big budget, big dragons, but ultimately not a lot of propulsive storytelling. Night of the Seven Kingdoms was refreshing. It was brief. It had a good amount of humor. It had a limited scope of story and some great performances by the two leads, Peter Clafley and I think his name is Dexter Ansel, the kid who plays Egg. It'll be interesting to see if it keeps up its momentum in future years. Then I'll get to the two major contenders this year, I think, in drama, which represent two very different categories of television show. So first is Pluribus, which is the newest show from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul creator Vince Gilligan, which aired on Apple TV. It's a very ambitious science fiction show starring Ray Seahorn from Breaking Bad, who is highly underrated, nominated many times, never won for her role as Kim Wexler. She probably should have won. It's a tour de force from her. In a lot of ways, it's a one-woman showcase for her really excellent acting. It has some very good supporting cast, but really is the Ray Seahorn show. It also shows Gilligan's really clinical, I would say Hitchcockian, not in the sense of suspense, but in how he sequences scenes, how he lines up tension, how he's able to kind of create a scene using inanimate objects and using just without speaking. You saw it a lot in some excellent sequences in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and I think Pluribus is really an amazing canvas given the much higher budget he has on Apple TV for it. Pluribus also represents kind of the new, or the early 2020s version of what prestige TV is, in the sense that it is a major big budget television show with maybe not big stars, but definitely big creative teams or highly regarded creative teams that put together ambitious seasons of television, and then probably are not going to put a second season for another 3 years because of how much money and how much production, how much time it costs to make the show. I'm thinking about last year's, I guess, runner-up for Best Drama, probably Severance, as another example of that, also on Apple TV. And I think that as much as Pluribus really wowed me, I'm concerned about if it comes out in three years from now, people are going to remember what happened in Pluribus. Then we get to The Pit, which is, for all intents and purposes, the front runner for Best Drama and for a number of categories in the drama category. If you don't know The Pit, maybe you're living in a pit, but it is a medical drama on HBO Max, starring Noah Wyle, who was John Carter on ER. I will definitely be doing an ER episode to talk about for any of you who love ER or have heard about ER because of The Pit and want to know more about it. And it took the Emmys by storm last year and won Best Drama, not only because it's an excellent show that focuses or is structured basically like 24, but in a hospital, where it looks at a full day shift in an emergency room in Pittsburgh, dealing with real-time, hour after hour episodes, but also because of its popularity among the industry itself for a lot of reasons. A, it does 15 episodes, unlike most of these shows, which are lucky to get to 8 episodes. B, it films in LA, it uses LA cast and crew, it's a big job creator for LA. And C, or 3, it has come out in 2 years and 2 seasons and consistently strives to get out its episodes year after year, evoking at least somewhat the model of network television that I think a lot of creators are looking to recapture. And I might do an episode where I get into kind of where we're going and the evolution of television over the years, from the network model to the prestige model to the streaming model to back to some sort of amalgamation of all 3 of the previous predecessors. The Pit should be the favorite, but if Pluribus won, I wouldn't be necessarily surprised or bothered. But it is an interesting showdown between 2 shows that are both really excellent in their own ways, but with pretty different philosophies. I'll run through some of the nominees in the other categories. For Best Actor, you have Sterling K. Brown for Paradise, Gary Oldman for Slow Horses, Rufus Sewell for The Diplomat, Mark Ruffalo for Task, Noah Wyle for The Pit. Task was one of these shows that probably could have been a limited series or even an anthology series, but because of its relative success and its high ratings, I think was decided it was going to be a recurring drama series. So we'll see how that goes in future years. I would say Noah Wyle is a favorite to win in that category, by the way. For leading actress, we have Carrie Coon for The Gilded Age, Chase Infinity for The Testaments, which is a sequel show to The Handmaid's Tale, Kerry Russell for The Diplomat, Ray Seahorn for Pluribus, and Zendaya for Euphoria. Euphoria's much discussed and maybe much maligned 3rd season, but Zendaya was excellent. I don't think I'll talk about Euphoria. I might, because it did have a lot of Emmy success, but maybe as a bonus episode one day. Supporting actor. As you see, when a show gets really popular in the Emmys, a lot of its nominees, a lot of its actors get nominated. So you have Patrick Ball, Sean Hannity, and Garen Howell for The Pit all nominated. Hannity won Best Guest Actor. And there are rules now, I think, on if you were nominated for Best Guest Actor, you can't be nominated for Guest Actor again. I think if you're nominated for Best Supporting, you can't then shift down to Guest Actor at a later date. Billy Crudup, I should say, for The Morning Show, a show that has not gotten really any love, but used to be a big nominee in previous years, has won this award twice. Maybe he wins again if all the Pit actors put their votes. My vote might be for Tom Pelphrey for Task, who was excellent in that show. And then Carlos Manuel Vesca in Pluribus, a really nice nominee for a pretty great role for a pretty unknown actor. Supporting actress. We have, again, a lot of people for The Pit. 4 different nominees for The Pit. Julianne Nicholson for Paradise, Allison Janney, Diplomat, and Carolyn Widra for Pluribus. Catherine Lanasa won last year. I think she probably is the favorite to win again. She has a specific episode this season of The Pit where she really shines. I won't get into Guest Actor and Guest Actress because those awards won't be necessarily featured in the main ceremony. And then finally we have Comedy Series, which is a really interesting category this year. Again, Apple TV had a pretty good year with 3 different shows. Margaret's Got Money Trouble, Shrinking, and Widow's Bay. I'll get to Widow's Bay as kind of really interesting show of this category. You have Abbott Elementary, which is the sole remaining network television show that consistently gets nominations across categories. It's an ABC show. You have Only Murders in the Building, which is, again, a show that just keeps getting nominations, kind of like Slow Horses for Drama, even though I think maybe the quality or the viewership has gone down, maybe. You have Nobody Wants This, which was the big surprise hit of last year. That was a Netflix show that had a pretty middling reviewed second season, but still got at least a few nominations. You have The Bear, which I'm going to do an episode on The Bear, I think, next, because it just ended. I think it's a very interesting show to talk about. It has fallen off a lot from the juggernaut it was in its first season and the role that it was in its second season that was stopped by this show, Hacks, which also ended this year, and I think for a while was considered probably the runaway favorite to win Best Comedy. It probably will win for Best Lead Actors and Best Supporting Actors. It might still win for Best Comedy as well, but the show that I think is really interesting to talk about, like I said, is Widow's Bay. Widow's Bay is an Apple TV program. It is a horror comedy show. Again, it's a dark comedy, but it's not sarcastic or acerbic or dismissive of horror. It is, I would say, incredibly respectful of the horror genre. It has some pretty scary sequences. It has some really faithful homages to different types of horror, like the creature feature, like Jaws, like the slasher, like the witch. I can't really explain it other than I'll say, if you love Stephen King, but also like Parks and Recreation, you're going to really like Widow's Bay. And Matthew Rhys, who I'll get to in a second, is nominated for this show. He's great as a kind of sad sack guy who's trying to make everything better, but ultimately doesn't know how. He's the mayor of a town that is trying to get more tourists, but also happens to be in the middle of a bit of a hellmouth for you Buffy the Vampire fans, Vampire Slayer fans, and all these things befall him and his team just trying to make it a better place to live. I think Widow's Bay is a very interesting show because while some of these shows are straight up comedies, a lot of them, like Margaret's Got Money Trouble or The Bear or Shrinking, are kind of dramedies. There's some humor in it, but it's still focused on a lot of feeling and a lot of emotion and a lot of sadness. And Widow's Bay, I don't think is that, and I think is a whole other beast in itself. And unlike Hacks, let's say, which is more of a almost laugh a minute show, which still has some pathos and some emotion, but it's still more of a straight up comedy, Widow's Bay is still incredibly funny. There's no denying that it is a comedy if you just pay attention, but it's very different than Hacks. So I think the two of these shows will be facing off on Emmy night. Lead actor, you have Steve Carell for Rooster, which is a Bill Lawrence show. Bill Lawrence made Scrubs and Shrinking. Jason Segel nominated for Shrinking. And Ted Lasso, which is coming back this year, strangely. Martin Short, who is a constant nominee for Only Murders in the Building, just had a good documentary about him, so maybe part of that was helping him, his campaign. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II for Wonder Man, which is an MCU show, which I really liked. It was very different for an MCU show. The MCU is kind of in a dire place, and I really liked Wonder Man and how it kind of took a genre and took something very different and wasn't caught up in too much lore and universe building. He's really good in that show. And then Matthew Rhys, who he said is nominated for his role in Beast in Me in the limited category as well, and could not only be nominated for 2 categories, which he is, he could win 2 categories, which would be pretty cool. If you watch The Americans, you'd be very excited. I will also do an Americans episode, I think, at some point. Sorry, wrong category. Lead actress, we have Quinta Brunson, who is a constant nominee for Abbott Elementary. She also is a creator of the show, continuing to be really funny and do great things with that show. Iowa Debris for The Bear. She won for the first season. She's not going to win for this season. Elle Fanning for Margaret's Got Money Trouble. Lisa Kudrow for The Comeback, which is a very interesting show that had 3 seasons and over 20 years, and kind of like almost even more dramatically than Curb Your Enthusiasm, just comes back when the creator decides it's time for a new season. And then Jean Smart for Hacks, who will win this category. It'll be, I think, her 4th win. Her 5th win for all 5 seasons that she's done. And will basically make it so that her and Julia Louis-Dreyfus have won, I think, 10 or 11 Best Actress nominations in the last 15 years. Both of them are queens of the TV comedy. And I think this just will solidify it. Supporting actor in comedy. We have an interesting group. Tyler James Williams is a constant nominee. Michael Urie, Paul Downs, 2 very funny supporting actors in their shows. Paul Downs also the creator and writer of Hacks. So cool that he gets to do this as well. He's won a few awards already for his writing. Coleman Domingo, who was really good in the last season of Euphoria, one of the few good performances. I've not watched the newest season, the 4 seasons. It's middling, especially for Tina Fey's standard, but he's quite good in most things. Nick Offerman, his 2nd nomination after Death by Lightning. He plays Margot's dad in Margot's Got Money Trouble. Really not a funny role at all, but a good performance. And then I think the other interesting nominee is Stephen Root for Widow's Bay. Stephen Root is a legend of television. You might know him from his role in News Radio as the kind of bombastic boss. You might also know him, or his voice maybe, as Bill from King of the Hill. He was also in Barry as Barry's handler. He's a legend of television and film. If you also watch Office Space, you will know him as Milton, the guy who will burn the building down if he doesn't get his stapler back. And then this somewhat unknown young man, Harry Ford for Shrinking. Pretty wild that one of the most famous actors of all time is now doing a Bill Lawrence comedy. But he is really good in the show, and I actually think that he is a favorite to win, and I think it'd be very cool for him to win. Although pretty wild if you told someone 30 to 40 years ago that in his 80s Harrison Ford will be playing in a dramedy about a group of psychiatrists and competing for an Emmy in a supporting role in a comedy series. They might not believe you. And then finally, supporting actress, we have a pretty interesting group of actresses. You have your legends like Michelle Pfeiffer from Margaret Got Money Trouble, really great character actor Dale Dickey in Widow's Bay. She has one scene in, I think, the penultimate episode that is just a masterclass of comedy. You have Abbott Elementary, Janelle James, who is a constant nominee in previous years. Other actresses were nominated for Abbott Elementary. As the show's gotten a little less in stature and notoriety, she remains kind of a standout. Jessica Williams on Shrinking is very funny. And you have then the Hacks girls, Megan Stalter, who has been in the news lately for her role in Oh Mary on Broadway, and I'll just leave it at that. But she was in a Lena Dunham show last year where she kind of played the surrogate character for Lena Dunham. She's very funny, and she's hilarious in Hacks as one of Gene Smart's character's managers, who Kayla, who with Jimmy, played by Paul Downs, are this comedy duo who get into all sorts of hijinks. Hannah Einbinder is the second lead of Hacks. She won for Best Supporting Actress last year. She probably has the inside track to win again, as this is the last season. And then the really interesting wild card is Kato Flynn from Widow's Bay. Kato Flynn plays Matthew Rhys's, I guess, assistant or right-hand woman in the town of Widow's Bay. She is a quirky, infuriating, opinionated woman who has a very strong drive to do things her way, and is just kind of the beating heart of the show for humor. I would vote for her if I had a vote. I think she's excellent in the show. There's a few amazing showcase episodes for her, and I think her getting a nomination and Dale Dickey getting a nomination especially shows that Widow's Bay has momentum and legs with the Academy, and I would not be surprised if she won. And if this is usually one of the earlier awards, usually it is, if it is one of the earlier awards and she wins, I think that is a very good omen for Widow's Bay writ large for the whole show. So that's my review of the Emmy nominations. I will get into more episodes and specific shows and profiles. I'd love to talk about generally the Emmys and your thoughts on their decision to cut some of the categories, who you think is going to win, who you think was snubbed. Please let me know. I'd love to hear it. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll speak to you later.